Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this is the podcast where I've covered every episode of the G.I. Joe Sunbow series, the DIC series. We've talked about all the single issues of G.I. Joe, Real American Hero from Larry Hama and Marvel Comics. We've even covered Extreme! And you know the score. I've been doing this for 9 years, so new listeners, if you are new to the program, please go back to our library and check out the archives, older issues. They're all very episode by episode, so whatever piques your fancy. If you want to watch an old episode of the cartoon, I will sit in your ear and watch it along with you. If you want to read a comic book, that's what this show is all about. And for you returning listeners, thank you again so much. Now, this week is very excited to have this interview this week. We're talking to Chuck Costas from the Propstore.com. If you're not familiar with Propstore, they are an online auction service that specializes in props, Hollywood props, screen used, stunt props, all types of Hollywood movie paraphernalia. Propstore has it for you. And as we recorded this, we are in the midst of a G.I. Joe auction. This auction ends on July 7th. So this episode, it drops on July 2nd. You still have 5 days left to go to propstore.com and check out the G.I. Joe. I believe it's propstore.com/G.I. Joe, but they have a big banner right on the first page. It's you won't be able to miss it. There's about 184 items up for sale. There's everything. We talk about it on this interview. It's really great. Chuck's very forthcoming with all the items and a real great storyteller on the history of these items and just the history of doing these G.I. Joe auctions. He's a massive G.I. Joe fan. And according to Chuck, this is probably going to be the last live action Joe auction because there really isn't much left. I guess there's been one or two in the past. And so for these first 3 live action Joe movies, there's not much left as far as props, clothing and, various pieces, paraphernalia that were in the movies. There's really not much that hasn't already been picked through. So if you are a fan of G.I. Joe, which if you are not a fan of G.I. Joe and you're listening to this, I question, Mom, you don't have to listen every week. But if you want to own a little piece of G.I. Joe history, check out these auctions over at Propstore. The starting bids are at $100, so that's very, very entry level, very affordable. And you'll hear in our conversation, we talk about all kinds of things that you can get. A lot of costume stuff, but there's some really cool costume stuff from some really key players that you can get your hands on. And then there's also some very entry level stuff that you can absolutely own a piece of G.I. Joe history. So this is great. It's a really great interview. Chuck was a super cool dude. Loved having a conversation with him. Hope we have him on again when we have more Joe stuff to talk about. And we talk a lot about comic book, old school comics. And you know me, I love old school comics. I love talking about the old school artists. And Chuck apparently is got a direct line to Mike Zeck. And you'll hear that story on this episode. It's all really cool. I'm so happy you're here. If you want to say hi, go to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Joe and Joe Pod. Send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. If you're interested in being on the show, if you're running your own G.I. Joe auction and you want to sell your own personal fake Snake Eyes prop, we'll talk about it. We'll do it. I'm not going to promise the kind of results that propstore.com gets, but we'll do it. I'm not above that. And if you want to help support the show, you can go to patreon.com/joeandjoepod and keep the lights on that way. But either way, reach out, say hello, like and review all the various stuff. Thanks so much for joining us this week. And so sit back and strap it down and listen into my fantastic conversation I had with Chuck Costas from propstore.com. Remember, July 7th is the final day. So you're hearing this in the first week. Don't sleep on it. Do not sleep on it. And now, on to our interview. What's that Punisher behind you? What's that from?
That is, strangely enough, not from the Punisher. It is from American Sniper.
Oh,
a little bit of history on that, because in the real world they had used this symbol as part of the platoon that they were.
Yeah.
And so technically this was actually really licensed from Marvel as part of the making of the movie. So it is an officially licensed Marvel Punisher logo. This over here, though, is the you
Go.
can't see it as
That's
well.
the go.
That
Well,
is the Tom Jane Punisher
oh yeah, you
from
do
the
have that.
original
Yeah.
2004 movie, which I think is a little bit cooler. That's from the end of the movie where he hangs up after it's all like beaten. You can't see all the damage to it, but
Yeah, the
it's
shirt that his kid gave
yeah,
him, and sandwiched in the middle there, of course,
I
it's
got
the
Ghostbusters in the
painting
middle.
from the Ghostbusters,
Yeah,
with them as
Ghostbusters
as
2, technically.
the holy quartet, I guess.
Yeah, they call that the fettuccine painting.
Oh,
That is the official name for
and
it.
is
And
that the actual one?
it wasn't the one that appeared in the film. This is the final version that was done by the artist Jack Johnson before he handed it over to production. They blew it up, and I think they touched up a lot of the, I don't know, they sort of darkened it and made it look a little bit more, I guess, movie camera ready.
Hmm.
But this is, as he says, this is the final version that he did.
So that is
But it is
his
an
actual
original film.
artwork.
It is actual
Awesome.
artwork by
Uh,
Jack Johnson.
I would expect nothing less from the business development director manager from propstore.com, Dave Chuck. I mean,
Well,
like I'd
thanks.
expect nothing less.
Yeah, you should see my case over there, but yeah, I can't
I
say that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We'll just describe it in loving terms. And so we're going to talk about your love for GI Joe. I was really happy to hear that when you guys reached out, about talking about this upcoming auction that you have, or well, actually, as we're recording this, it's an ongoing auction. It ends on July 7th. That you were a huge GI Joe fan, and then a little research here and there, and yeah, you're a massive GI Joe fan with a huge collection of GI Joe artwork and all that stuff.
Yes, yes. GI Joe. When I started collecting original art, I guess the history is I used to go to comic conventions. That's how I made my money when I was a kid. I used to buy collections of comic books, basically keep one of everything that I wanted, and then I would sell off all the duplicates. And grew up in the Washington D.C.
I was
area, so
just
we
going to
had
ask, where'd you go? Okay, Washington D.C.
yeah, it
Got
was
it.
a really great comic book scene because I don't know why. We always had regular artists sort of floating through that would do local shows. We had actually competing convention people. We had serendipity conventions and we had jubilee conventions, and they would almost like every month they would do one, and they so almost every 2 weeks we had a convention going on, and then
In the 80s,
occasionally we get the creation conventions that were like the big ones that with the Star Trek conventions that would come through as well, and
in
so it
in
was
the
it was great.
1980s, in the 1980s,
In the 1980s, yeah,
that is a
DC, believe it or not, was
lot.
a comic book hotbed.
That
Yeah,
is a
it was one
lot
of the
of
best markets.
conventions. Yeah.
Yeah, so for a kid that was in his teens, it actually became a fledgling business for myself. And so I would, like I said, I could make enough money either buying things out of like the Comic Buyer's Guide or speculating on buying it. It was the black and white independent age, so I'd buy these comics. I wasn't lucky enough to get Turtles 1, but I bought like 20 Turtles 2s, for a
Yeah.
dollar 60 a piece, and then turn those around. But I'd buy like Punishers, and I had a good eye, and you could sort of double, triple, quadruple your money relatively easy back in those days. And for a kid that was growing up, I had lawn money. I would buy stuff. It helped me collect more. But I met in 1985, one of the early creators that I met was Larry Hama. He showed up at one of the shows in Alexandria, Virginia. And I was set up selling comics there, and I happened to be sitting next to him all day, and didn't know, frankly, it was kind of like, oh, I got the artist for GI Joe sitting next to me. That's great. And my best friend was a toy collector, and I wasn't, as big into that. And I sort of said, well, I like the artwork. So I was like, hey, can you draw some sketches? And he's like, well, I'm not really the artist, but I'll draw you some stuff. And it was like, really, he did me a nice Scarlet. He did a nice stalker for my friend. And we just got to know him, and it was hanging out. Little did I know it was shortly after he drew GI Joe's 21 and 26.
I was just going
So
to say, he's being very humble saying he's not
yeah,
the
he's
artist
being
like
very,
this.
very
He's a
humble.
massively
I don't do
talented
much.
artist. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I write the comics primarily. So I got this cool sketch from him, and it got me thinking. I was like, wow, I should just start collecting this original art. And so I met Mike Zeck. There was a number. He came back in 1986.
Hmm.
Met him when the Punisher came out, and because I had started collecting GI Joe, I was like, ooh, I hope he has some GI Joe covers. And so he had the covers to GI Joe 45, 46, and 47. And he was sitting next to me all weekend long, and this was a creation convention, so it was a 3 day show. And so I basically went to his table first thing. I was like, "Ooh, do you have any GI Joe covers?" He's like, "Yep. Which one do you want?" And I was like, "Hmm." And some of them they hadn't even come out yet. I think 45 may have just come out.
Wow.
So 46 and 47 nobody had ever seen before. And of course, 46 is the classic Snake Eyes Storm Shadow
Yeah.
issue.
Oh, yeah.
And then 47 was I thought the artwork on 47, which introduced Beachhead, was actually, I was like, oh, this is pretty dynamic. I'm like, I think I like 47 the best. I
That's
wasn't
that's
really
the one
into,
they're on the devilfish, right?
yeah, they're like going
Yeah.
through the water. It's
Yeah, yeah.
great.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
It was great, from an artwork perspective. So I chose that. I think it was $40 at the time. And then the guy I was working with at the show, he chose 45, and then some other kid came by and bought the 46. He was like quick to scoop up the 46 before we, he was like, "Oh, I want that one." Snake Eye Storm Shadow. And so I was like, "Ah, fine." It's like
Yeah.
the artwork on 47 was better. So that was the first, I guess, cover that I had bought. And then I asked Mike at the end of the show. I was like, "Well, does anybody buy your GI Joe artwork?" And he's like, "No, I don't think really anybody cares about my GI Joe artwork. So if you want it, I'm happy to give you a call every month and see if you want the cover, and if so, you can buy it." And
Crazy.
so it started up my relationship with Mike Zeck of basically buying GI Joe covers from him every month that they were doing it. So I lived through the whole special missions that he was doing. Sort of the regular run 52. I got that from him with quick kick. Um, and then, as far as I think the last thing I bought from him was the yearbook 3, and so he had that was the also classic Snake Eyes Storm Shadow
Yeah.
and Scarlet cover, and so that one was a little bit. He was like, "Ooh, this is really good. I'm gonna have to charge you $50 for this one." So he's like, "All right, all right,
Oh,
I like it."
darn.
And then, frankly, I got so many pieces of artwork from Mike that I was kind of filling up I used to put them up on my walls. I used to buy frames at the local Hex,
Yeah.
and I was like, wow, I've really filled up my walls with everything. And I don't know if this stuff's ever going to be valuable because nobody really collects original artwork. So maybe I should put the brakes on for a little while. And he got a rep at that time, and he raised his price from like $50 to $75 a cover, and that was like crazy prices.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it was crazy. So, but it got me starting to do that. And so, I just kind of kept on the kick of buying GI Joe artwork. I tracked down a lot of early pages, and when I worked in California, fast forward many years, around 2000, and one of the people I connected with then, strangely enough, because of his Tales from the Crypt artwork that I was trying to get, was Mike Vosberg.
Mm.
And don't know why, given that I'm a huge Punisher fan and GI Joe fan, I had forgotten that Mike Vosberg had drawn GI Joe.
Yeah, yeah.
Punisher, and he was really kind of the, I guess, second major, second regular artist, although Perlin technically was the second artist to draw GI Joe. But Mike still had some of his GI Joe artwork, so I was able to get some stuff from him directly, and go into many stories about that, but maybe not in this podcast. And then, Herb Trimpe also became a friend of mine as well, and he had sold off his artwork years and years ago. But I tracked down people that had that and was able to buy some of the very early issues, like issue 1 and 3 and 4, and some of the stuff that he had done back then. And at the time, it was relatively cheap.
Yeah.
Nobody else really seemed to care about GI Joe, and so I sort of carved out this niche, not thinking that I was really competing with anybody, and loved it. And it was also just getting to know these artists really well. That I'd read their comics, got to know them as people really well. I mean, Herb. Unfortunately, when he passed away, his widow had reached out and asked me to help sell some of his
Mm-hmm.
the remaining artwork that the family or she had kept, and so I helped them with that. But it was a little bit of a sad goodbye because
Sure.
Herb was such a great guy. He used to came to one of my I used to have outings of comic art people in Maryland, and he came down one time and sold me the. He kept all the special missions artwork because he felt like that was like for him was the best artwork that he had ever done on GI Joe.
I agree with that. His special missions artwork is next level.
Yeah, it was a little different for me at the time. It was a little shock because I was as a kid I grew up sort of seeing this very blocky Herb Trimpe sort of Kirby-esque style.
Hulk. Yeah,
And
his
when
Hulk
he
stuff.
did his special mission stuff, what people don't realize about Herb Trimpe is that he could adapt his style to whatever the editors wanted.
I was just going to, I've said that on the show before. That man was absolutely more brilliant than people give him credit for. He was a chameleon. Even when he adapted, after being a veteran of the industry for at that point 40 some years, he adapted to the Image style in the 90s.
Yeah.
And you're
He
like,
saw that was
yeah,
the future. And he's like, Rob Liefeld's in.
Yep.
Let me go Rob Liefeld style.
And he did it. And it's like, wow, yeah, he had to been drawing comics for 40 some years at that point. And he was flexible enough to be able to do it. And in a for that style, very passable way.
Yeah.
His Hulk stuff's amazing. His G.I. Joe stuff's amazing. His special mission stuff is his top G.I. Joe stuff. Trimpe is an absolute underrated comic book genius for real. We've been saying that for a long time.
Yeah. So I was because I had bought all the special missions covers as they were coming out from Zach. So I had one, two, three, four, five, six, seven from Zach. The first special missions book that her brought to me was issue 2 because I really love that story. I felt it was very much sort of an homage to the number 2 from the regular series in some ways, as far as the way that the storyline
Hmm.
panned out and the sort of the ending to that story. But that was like the first book I was able to put back together with the cover and the interior on it. And it's still in my collection. So
That's great. Have you contributed to? I know they did an Artifacts edition for Mike Golden stuff from IDW. Have they talked to you about doing a GI Joe kind of artist edition?
Joe,
Because
I
you would
will
be the
tell you
source
that
for that.
where the story ends is if you remember a few years ago, IDW had solicited a GI Joe artist edition book,
Okay.
and so for that, I had worked with the editors to put together the contents of what that book was going to be. But very frankly, it was the solicitation on it was like the lowest that they had ever gotten on any artist edition book that they never ended up publishing it. So
Oh,
it was sort of it was planned. We had you see the cover of it. It was supposed to be the cover to GI Joe 2. So if you look out on the internet, you might see some remnants of the
oh,
original solicitations for it. But
that's a
the
bummer.
model, and I always said to them, I said the model for this is not doing it through comic book shops. And no offense to you, Joe, but it's through a Kickstarter. It really
Yeah,
is
yeah,
like
for
what
sure.
you need to do is get the artist to sign, add signatures to that. So do it a Kickstarter way, sort of what they did with the GI Joe book recently in the Transformers books
Hmm.
is sort of incent people at different levels and get different artists involved with it, like Mike Zack or Mike
Yeah,
Vosberg.
and you're guaranteeing your sales, so you're not overprinting and
Yeah, you're getting
you're not
people more
losing money
excited
on
about the
yeah, and you're
program
not losing your money on warehousing and
yeah,
stuff like
because it
that.
is a
Yeah.
bit of a niche.
Oh,
Niche. So
100%. Yeah.
so we will see if one day that this project gets resurrected in a different form. But I do have many of the, I guess, complete books that still exist out there that could be reprinted in that format. I'd love to do that, including there was a little known story that there was a GI Joe 24 that was drawn by Mike Vosberg and not Russ Heath, which was
Hmm.
the final version of it. So I have Vosberg's original pencils
Do you?
for issue 24 that have never been seen publicly.
Well,
I hope one day that they do get published because
Skybound, if
it's a
Skybound, if you're
huge.
listening,
But
if you're listening, Skybound,
uh,
reach out. Have you spoken to anyone over there, or
I
do you know
cannot
anyone on that side of
comment.
the fence?
I
Okay,
cannot comment.
all
But
right.
they are here in Los Angeles,
Yes,
so
they are right down the street from me. I
right
know.
down the
Oh, I
street.
know where
So
they're at.
so yeah, yeah. But no, I can't comment on future projects. But I hope one day to be able to contribute back to the Joe community through the original art. But
That would be great. I mean, the amount of money and the response they got to the Joe Omnibus stuff that just
yeah,
says do more Kickstarter
absolutely.
projects, do it in
I thought it was one of the
whatever
best campaigns ever.
whatever the form is. Yeah, absolutely do it.
Yeah, loved
Uh,
it. But yeah, so now my contribution back to the Joe community is through this auction. So
it's great. Yeah,
uh,
the listeners at
as I
propstore.com, we got a big GI Joe auction coming up.
yeah, go to propstore.com/GI Joe and you can find it. And I guess I'll say the dates. It's already started. And as of today, it's June 27th, but it's going on through July 7th, 2025. So if you go to propstore.com anytime before then, you will find it. But I guess I got started, sort of as being a longtime comic book and then comic art collector. The natural transition for me was moving into sort of movie props, especially since I moved to Los Angeles.
Hmm.
I joined PropStore about 6.5 years ago, but PropStore had done a GI Joe Rise of Cobra auction prior to that, and I had actually participated in that and bought a number of items. And right now, I bought a complete or somewhat complete Snake Eyes costume from the first movie,
Oh wow,
and then a Scarlet costume, like the hero Scarlet costume from the first movie. Um, and I have now put those on display. I actually have an art exhibit going on of the work of the Marvel art of Mike Zeck going on at Indiana University. But I put those costumes on display with it to sort of show here's some of Mike's GI Joe artwork featuring Scarlet and Snake Eyes. But ultimately, I believe that Mike Zeck's version of sort of Snake Eyes version 2, on that cover of 63 or the cover to 50.
the landmine cover,
I'm sorry.
the landmine cover where they're walking. He and Scarlett are walking through the field. Is that the
I
one?
like the landmine cover, but then there was the 25th anniversary cover, which was issue 53 that I think
Oh,
everybody.
his headshot.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that sort of defined
sure.
Snake Eyes version 2 for everybody in
Yeah.
some
Well,
ways.
the
So
best version. We just call that the best version. Everyone knows that. Yeah.
the best.
Everyone knows
Like the
that.
first.
Well,
like the first iteration of
you,
Snake Eyes.
you oh he's no he's good. You casually drop this, and we'll circle back to the pop store. You do also this you have a program running at Indiana University now, and a display of all this Mike Zeck artwork. I'm a
Yes.
Chicago guy, so definitely got some Chicago listeners here.
Yes.
It runs through early next year, I think.
Yeah, early next year. I don't know if they give me an exact date. I think at least through February, maybe March of 2026. And if it really talks through Mike Zeck's Marvel career. That's where I do have the cover to G.I. Joe Yearbook 3 on display. So if
Mm-hmm.
you want to see that one, which is a classic. Strangely, years later, although I didn't buy it from Mike, I found the back cover to that, which I paid a whopping $100 for. I can tell you that much. So I have 150 into the back
Hey,
cover.
if it makes you feel better, I paid $6 for an original Walter Simonson, circa like 1990.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It still has the pencil price tag in the corner.
I know. It's like we
Yeah.
talk like we're like old guys now. It's like, whoa, back in the day.
Yeah, I tell my wife, I go, if something crazy happens to me, she knows where that is. I'm like, everything else is whatever. I go, but there's like 2 pages I got there, but you know
For
where
you.
they're at. Deal with them.
Yeah, no.
Well, how did
So I have
Yeah.
that going on. It talks through Mike's career, starting with Master of Kung Fu, all the way through. Yeah, I guess Craven's Last Hunt in some ways was his last
Man,
major Marvel work that he did. But
so amazing.
a lot of Secret Wars artwork that's becoming somehow more relevant these
Yep.
days.
Yep. How did it end up at Indiana University? Did you go there? Did Mike go
I
there?
did. I did. I was an alumni. I went to undergrad at Indiana University. My parents had lived there, and strangely enough, I had been doing a real estate deal. They had wanted to buy some of our family property, and so we did deal with them. And somehow the conversation came up of, I'd like to try to figure out how I can give back to the university. I'd love to do some art exhibits with you guys. And they had let me know that my old art school, where I took art classes, had been converted into a pseudo museum.
Oh,
And so they had put me in touch with the head curator over there. And so, what they said is, look, we rotate exhibits through there. We got a number of different rooms. We'd love to work with you because we've got this comic book collection, and nobody knows that we have a comic book collection. And it would be great to be able to put a focus on that. And what we decided is from I guess a marketing ploy or whatever is that if they could put their comic books next to the original art, they really could showcase the comics in the way that they should, but also educate people about the creation of comics. And ultimately, we put some movie props in there too to be, to attract people, because I think people are now used to really seeing comic book characters through the movies.
mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit of a draw that way, but it's also to show the evolution
Yeah.
from sort of comic books to movies. And so not only do we have the GI Joe costumes, we've got Venom capsule from the very first Venom movie, because Mike created the Black Spider-Man costume,
Mm-hmm.
which was the symbiote, as well as a John Bernthal Punisher costume that had never been displayed before.
It
So
tells the whole story, and
yeah,
especially what you were saying. It's literally started with a pencil on a piece of artboard that was valued at $20. You know what I mean?
it had
Like,
actually no value. I mean, it was really
yeah,
done
yeah.
for
That's all
publication.
this stuff that it
Yeah,
just it starts with the germ of an idea, and it becomes
yeah,
something that's crazy. And these days, a lot of people just see the crazy, and they don't realize no, this stuff had such humble origins, and
yeah.
and
I mean,
it's important
it's
to remember the creators that did that.
yeah. You got to remember. I mean, a guy like Herb Trimpe, he was really just trying to earn a paycheck to
Yeah.
bring money home
Oh,
to the family.
totally. Absolutely.
Um, and I've gotten to know his family, which is they're all wonderful people as well. But it really was a job for him, so that's why he was willing to be a
Yeah.
chameleon and do
I
whatever it took to do
I
that.
was
Yeah,
lucky to meet him once. I met him once. It was right before. It was like a year before he passed. I just recently moved out to LA, and he was doing a like Long Beach show or something like that. And as soon as I saw him, I'm like, I need to get your autograph on this GI Joe poster. I'm like, that's your stuff is so instrumental. And then and so that's one of my treasured. And it's got his to Joe and all that stuff. So that's one of my treasured on my art wall pieces that I was finally able, because I've been going to comic shows since I was 12. So I've got various autographs from various people over the years, on old show stubs and things like that. But like that was really elusive. He was elusive for me just because I'd never crossed paths with him. So that was really special. He was a real special artist. It's nice to hear that he was a special guy as well.
he really was really really nice. I think all these people are really good people that ultimately did it. And, even Mike Vosberg. It was can't say he came from even Herb came from a military background.
Mm-hmm.
Mike did not, and quite the opposite, in fact. And so it was for him. It was about telling stories here and bringing it to life. And I admire it. But Mike Zeck's stuff, really, when he did the covers, and they put him as the cover artist because it was to attract readers. It was to sort of up level it, take it to the next level, and sort of attract people in and want to buy this. And
Yeah.
you think about the distribution of the comics back in those
Oh,
days.
yeah.
They were probably competing with X-Men, as far
He
as
was, yeah, and
readership.
he probably was the most impactful cover artist, definitely of GI Joe, but of the '80s, he's definitely in the top 5. You talk
Yeah.
about your John Burns and your Simonson and all that stuff. He had a way of encapsulating a cover that also told the story. It wasn't just like most covers these days are just pretty pictures of something and do you like the art style or not. His covers told the story that was happening in there and still had this one-off impact. It had this iconic look to them. All the Kraven the Hunter ones. They're telling you what's going on in those books, but then they also could be posters on your wall. That was something that Zach really, really put a finger on in an early day. So I love seeing it. Our friends, What's on Joe Mind, they're based out of Indiana. So if you guys don't go over to Indiana University and check this out, you're missing out. You're missing out. You're a failure. And I will yell at you the next time I talk to you guys. But back to the propstore.com. This is the thing, is listeners, as you're hearing this, this is probably dropping on Wednesday, July the 2nd. So you're getting ready for your 4th of July weekend, getting ready to celebrate. Hopefully you don't lose any thumbs. We don't want that. But if you do lose thumbs, there's probably a glove, like a Snake Eyes glove in the auction you could use to cover up that terrible, terrible scar. Or if you lose an eye, we've got helmets to cover that up. Whatever damage you're going to do to your body this weekend at 4th of July, you can then quickly go to propstore.com because you'll have 3 more days to be like, how do I cover this terrible life-altering scar? That's why we're here.
That's a good sell, Joe.
Hey,
that's a good sell.
It's what I do.
But yeah, no, the auction goes through July 7th, so you do have a few more days.
Yeah. And you got a ton of items on there. There's like 184 lots, if I'm counting correctly.
Yes,
and you've
184 lots, but a lot of those lots have multiple items. In there.
Yeah, there's patches, helmets, jackets, pants, full costumes, pieces of costumes, props. You've got the Urashikage jewel, the giant snake prop.
Yes.
How big is that? Is that like
just give
coffee
people
table?
context of what we're talking about. So we have, for those that saw Snake Eyes GI Joe Origins, which is I guess you call it GI Joe 3. There were one of the trials of Snake Eyes was to go into this giant pit where he encounters 3 snakes that are very large, and in order to bring that to life, it was obviously computer graphics. But in order to give the actor something to react to, they built these giant snake heads to represent where the snake heads were going in the fight sequences. So there's 3 different snake heads that we have in the auction. I guess we have all 3 of them, and they have what they call these CG dots on it, so that they could track sort of how the head should be represented when they do the graphics. But we have 3 of those, and they're, I think, a little over 3 feet long. So they are large, and they're actually flat on the back, so you could actually mount them on the wall. And they have hand grips underneath it, so that the people that were maneuvering these things could be the snakes and sort of react to the actors in it. But we have 3 of those, and I do say, if you're going to buy those, hopefully you live in Los Angeles and you can pick them up live. That would be the ideal. But they are relatively large, but they are quite impressive.
That's kind of
they
neat.
actually carved a snake head into these things, and these are like molds of that. So they're a statue / piece of art in and of themselves, but they're also used in the making of this movie.
And they actually do look like snakes, ladies and gentlemen. They're not just like cubic block representations.
Yeah.
Like, no, you look at it and you go, oh, that's a giant snake head. I wonder what that was for. Yeah, you've got.
Well, G.I. Joe fans may know.
Oh, well, G.I. Joe fans absolutely should. If you didn't know what we were referencing, I don't know. Mom, stop listening. Okay, because this probably isn't your podcast episode. They've got I think the coolest thing that so far, just quick perusing, is right now getting the most bids, and I think what I'm going. It's that Snake Eyes stun helmet.
Well,
it's the 3 seconds of 3 seconds of actual looking Snake Eyes we saw on the screen. That's his stun. It's the motorcycle.
No. It's not from the 3rd one.
Oh, that's not from the 3rd one.
No, the helmets that we have are actually from GI Joe Retaliation.
Oh, well, then we saw a lot of it.
I consider them this, and there was a lot. So if you think about GI Joe Retaliation, Snake Eyes is in a lot of that movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then there's a main actor who I think we know who it is, but then there was I think 1 or 2 stunt actors as well that would also sort of share the responsibilities for doing some of the stunts. And so for that, they had to build these costumes. And the helmets that obviously they redesigned it between Rise of Cobra and Retaliation. And they sort of gave him a sort of a fully sculpted motorcycle type helmet that has a visor that is attached with magnetic clamps to the front of it. Um, but I had never seen one of these helmets ever before. This auction came up, and as we got to doing this, it was kind of funny because I was like, I've been looking for one of these for my own personal collection for
Hmm.
about 15 years at this point in time and never seen one come our way. And here we have actually two of them in the auction. One that is part of a costume. It's mostly complete. And then the other one is just the helmet with the chest plate, strangely enough. And I can give you a little bit of like, it's an interesting story behind the chest plate because
Please.
as I was looking, we got a couple of these things and we looked at the markings and it said, you, for set deck. And I was like, why would they have a chest plate as set deck? And the reason is if you look in the third movie, when they go into the Arashikage lab
Hmm.
and they sort of see, I think what you were referring to is you see the helmet for the first time.
Hmm.
You actually are seeing, I believe, a G.I. Joe Retaliation Snake Eyes helmet if you look very closely
Oh.
with the chest plate in there. In addition, what you see is a chest plate from the underwater. I think we have one of those in here. But when Cobra Commander and Destro and then ultimately Storm Shadow are captured in Einzargen prison, they're put in cryo chambers.
Uh-huh.
And if you look really closely, the see-through chest plate from one of those is also seen in that lab.
Oh,
So
that's
it's
neat.
interesting to sort of see when I was preparing for this movie or for this auction, I went back and watched all the movies and I'm like, wait a second, they actually did reuse some of the props from the second movie and the third movie.
That's really cool. So Snake Eyes fans, that's the stuff to keep your eye out for. You can also get one of his
Keep your
leather
eye,
jackets.
yeah.
And remember,
Go when you first see the lab where Snake Eyes sneaks into the Arashikage lab. You'll see these things all on the table, kind of like a very Wrightson-esque, sort of lab in there, and you'll find these like hidden objects
yeah,
inside there.
Firefly's stunt double leather jacket. That's really cool. There's a lot of the clothing is kind of normal street, like you could get away with wearing it. And then, but listeners, you have to remember, actors are very small people, and these are all customized for very small people. I
Well,
don't.
I would say that, but Joe, I would also say that we've got a number, and I intentionally did this because when Propstore had its very first auction of Rise of Cobra many years ago, they also sold some of the background jackets that were in costumes that were worn for the background actors that
Uh-huh.
were Joes, and those came in various sizes, and so a lot of times. I would, unfortunately, I was in the Palisades fire, so I ended up losing my
Oh,
collection of GI Joe jackets, which was very
oh.
sad.
Well, I'm more
Um,
sad about the Palisades fire. Home
yeah.
wise, are you or were you? Are you still displaced? Have you?
Technically, I'm still homeless. Yes, no, but
Yeah.
we did find an apartment to live in, and so we're recovering,
And but
and we
everyone
are we're rebuilding.
physically
Like,
safe.
I'm sorry.
Physically everyone was safe. You got out okay. No one. No
Yeah,
one.
everybody was in it was safe. I think it's I won't go into all the details of the
Sure.
fire. I mean, about a third of my neighborhood was
Yeah.
wiped clean.
Oh,
Unfortunately, more of the Palisades was just as people may have seen on the news. It was 6,000
it's crazy.
houses that lost at
It's
least just in the Palisades. I think it was 15,000 overall because of all these fires.
yeah. It looks
But
like
you
something
see
out of
what
a movie.
that
It
does.
looks like something out of a movie. Like
It,
you're
it
like, I
does. It
can't. Yeah.
really, I sort of get the feeling, having lived through it, of what it was like to live maybe in like Hiroshima or
Yeah.
Nagasaki or something like that. But, I won't compare it exactly to that because it wasn't exactly that, but the after effects of what it did, it just bombed out an entire city.
Mm-hmm.
And to go through it for, I had access to the city when many people didn't. And to see all the destruction, and there was literally city blocks that were just, houses that used to be houses that are just no longer
Mm-hmm.
there.
And businesses,
And,
people's.
and
I
it
mean,
meant a lot of
livelihoods and
collections
yeah.
like my own. I was able to get some stuff out of the house, but I had a Snake Eyes. I had one of those, the winter outfits from the first GI Joe
Mm-hmm.
Rise of Cobra, and unfortunately, there's no way that you can sort of take that off a mannequin really quickly and
Yeah.
put it in the car.
Right.
So it ended up no longer being part of this earth. But um,
Well, I am sorry. But bigger picture, I'm happy you're safe, but that sucks, and
yeah,
that's real
the bigger
crappy.
picture is,
Being yeah,
it's a new beginning,
yeah,
for a lot of us, and at least, everything's safe. We can rebuild. We can
good.
look forward to it. We can, You can take the positive side of things, and I try to do that because yes, you can focus on the negative so much on this.
Yeah.
But
It does teach
but
you.
anyway,
On a lighter side, it does teach you the lesson that you should keep the snake eyes on a mannequin prop in your car so you can ride in the carpool lane.
well, I keep saying the good thing is for this Indiana exhibit that we were talking about, a lot of
Yeah.
the stuff I had was
Oh,
actually
sure.
stored at
Yeah.
work. I was staging it to ship out to Indiana, and so my other snake eyes did survive because of that. So it was
Hmm.
at work. So some of the collection did survive
Yeah.
because of that. But
Wow.
yeah, I guess I'm trying to remember where we were starting
Oh
before
well,
we get
no. Well,
into
we were talking about snake eyes. We were talking about costumes to fit fat dudes. You got them.
Yes,
You
you
got the
can
back.
do.
You got the background
Joe, are
costumes.
you looking at me and saying that?
No, I'm
think
looking
you
at
can do that
myself.
on
I'm
CJ.
literally staring at myself, going, "Oh my God, where's a jacket that I could fit in?" And I did see
Yeah,
there were some extra larges.
we do have some extra
Yeah.
larges in this auction. We have some, I actually was lucky enough to get a double extra large, but
Oh,
yeah. So there are some. If you look at some of the costume lots in there, part of my intention was to allow fans to do that. Go to a GI Joe convention,
yeah.
wear one of these background costumes. You don't have to necessarily wear a main actor's costume, and a lot, even some of the ones that we have are stunt actors, and so some people don't care quite as much about that. But I would encourage people to look at the eye, as far as like these are actually really cool just to sort of wear
Yep.
at special events in some ways. And I would do that all the time. And in fact, from the first auction, I had a number of jackets and I gave one to every one of my friends that was a G.I. Joe creator. So, except strangely enough, Mike Zeck did not get his because he's been over in the Philippines for years. But I gave one to Larry, Steve Lealoha, John
Oh.
Beatty, Mike Vosberg. So,
Oh man,
all those guys.
I met Steve Lealoha last summer for the very first. I'm 50 years
Yeah.
old. I met him for the first time, and my jock, because I don't know that he does a lot of cons, and
No,
so
he doesn't.
yeah, and it was at San Diego, and he was just at an artist alley kind of table chilling, and my jaw dropped, and I went, "Wait, you're like," and he started smiling. I'm like, "Oh my God, what a treasure! Go to Comic Cons, meet these people. They're amazing, and they
Yeah,
made all the
Steve's
stuff we love."
Steve is an amazing guy. He is very humble
He
about what
yes.
he's contributed. I mean, not only did he do G.I. Joe, I'll talk about, he was the inker on the original Star Wars
Yes.
adaptation, for
Over
Howard
Chaykin,
Chaykin,
yeah.
started with issue 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
The whole story about how after, I guess, issue 1, Howard was looking for an inker and he just happened to be in an elevator and he was talking to the editor and it was like, yep, I can be the anchor for you starting with issue 2. He's like, great, you're hired. Done.
That sounds like a Howard Chaykin thing to say. Yeah, it really does.
But the odd thing about that too was when they were drawing that, another interesting story was they didn't know what Darth Vader looked like back then. And so
They
I was funny
colored him
talking
green.
about him and Tom Palmer. They had these reference books, but they, and I guess they got to go to some early screenings on some of these things. But a lot of time those artists were working on these. That's why the cover to issue 1 of Star Wars is like, is that really what Darth Vader looks like? I think Tom told me they told him that Darth Vader was supposed to look like a black fireman's helmet. That's what he should draw. So when he was inking the cover to issue 1, it's kind of, that's why Darth Vader's not quite what you see in the final movie there, because he was working off of distant reference, so to speak.
It makes for a fun quirkiness to that whole era. That whole era has that fun little off center, a little not, where today you get really like straight from Photoshop versions of Harrison Ford and stuff. Back then it's like, this is the comic booky version, and they're allowed to have a little more fun,
Look at the cover. I mean, the gun is completely wrong for Han Solo. It's not even close, But anyway,
but there are auctions. There are lots in this for people who are interested in every level. There's the ones that are going to be more expensive, your Snake Eyes and probably your Fireflies.
The Snake Eyes, two Snake Eyes helmets in there. One I'll mention, it's got a reproduction helmet. We actually a reproduction visor, because one came without a visor, and we went back to the original company that made these, Ironhead Studios, and we had them make it. It's not a see-through version of it. It's actually a more of I guess just one to make it look complete. But we went back and made sure it was accurate, which you cannot find an accurate Snake Eyes from Retaliation out there. And as I was starting to say, even with those, those cost $30,000 to $40,000 a piece to make those helmets. It's crazy. That's what I found. I found that out through the costume supervisor. He's like, yeah, those were not cheap helmets.
Really?
And that's why they did not have many, and that's why I did not find many when I was searching for these, for the last few years. And so keep that in mind, is when you look at a lot of the stuff that's in here, when they make movies, I mean, they pay a lot to make these things custom. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, whatever you end up paying, is usually a fraction of whatever it originally cost to make these. If you were to try to make these things custom.
Yeah, these are all
And a lot of
artisanal,
them,
hand sewn, handcrafted pieces.
yeah, they have their own costume teams that
Yeah.
work on these things, and sometimes they're making things scratch. And if you look at the GI Joe, for instance, even the background costumes, for the Rise of Cobra, they did this original sort of GI Joe camo print that has GI Joe written inside, which I think is the really sort of cool thing. It's supposed to be subtle, and if you look at the movie, you'll see that. But it's a hidden thing in there. A lot of those fabrics, all custom made fabrics that they would make for the films. But yes, you're correct. We try to have something for everyone. So you could just get background costumes. You could get patches. We have some that are just like one of each patch.
Yeah, I like the patch stuff. That's what I was going to talk about next. So listeners, if you right now, the starting bids and all this stuff is like $100, and you get there's
everything's $100,
multiple lots, but you like this one lot looks like you get about like 30 different Joe patches, of all sizes and shades of yellow and silver and red, and the coolest part of those is the Cobra metal lapel pin. Those Cobra pins are
you saw
dope.
those, huh?
Oh, those are dope. And that's the kind of cool thing where you're like, okay, I can't afford the Snake Eyes thing, but I can go in and I can get a patch. I think probably the most unique, coolest thing is the Lady J lipstick.
The Lady J
lipstick, which functional
again,
with a functional light up light scanner.
Yeah. So this is from the scene where Lady J is at the ball with it turns out to be Zartan, but she doesn't know it's Zartan. He thinks it's the president. They test his hair in the DNA tester, and then we have the flip side because both Duke and Flint have a DNA reader that is. We have one of those as well. It's a visual effects version, so you see a green screen on it, which is green tape, in the actual item. But yes, the lipstick is cool because you press a button and the lights go kind of up as they do in the movie, which is neat. So I was actually thrilled to see that we were able to get that for people to offer it to them.
And I know there's ladies out there who do the G.I. Joe cosplay. Joe Colton, our friend from What's on Joe Mind, they do G.I. Joe cosplay. So if you're doing a Lady J cosplay, you need to have this lipstick.
And I would say, for cosplayers out there, even if you don't, hopefully you do buy something and take something home in the auction, but check out just the photos that we've taken of all these items, because Propstore does high-res photos that you can blow up and sort of see all the details in that to see, how accurate your cosplayer is. Nothing better than wearing the original, and we're trying to make this as if, we don't set the final prices, but by starting everything at $100, we're trying to make it so that you can get it. And I also say with some of these lots, like you said with the patches, okay, you're going to get sometimes more patches than you want to keep. You might have some extras.
Yeah, you could turn around and flip them and get your money back.
Well, you can put them on eBay, but you can also, it's like I would say team up with the friends. You like there's a lot of the helmets that we have. We've got like 5 helmets, and some of them are multiples. So if they buy 5 helmets, it's like they keep one of each type, and then they trade you 2. You can do some swapping there too of some of the lots. We put them, we organize them as best we could to give you value for money in many cases. And try to keep it reasonable though. But I do think there's room for that. And I saw some of that after the first auction is that some people just kept some of the stuff, they sold some of the stuff, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's cool too.
And speaking of the actual website itself, before our interview, I signed up to be a bidder. Could not be faster. I believe I was timing myself. It was like 3 minutes from start to finish. I've done some auction, to register as a bidder. I've done some auction website bidding before, and it's a lot of times it can be very complicated because they want to verify some things. I forget their actual website, but your website is super easy. It's like buying something at any kind of online shopper. You put in your credit card, they go, okay, great, you're going to bid it, we're going to bill you for it, you're going to win this stuff. So if you're at all worried about that, because it's not a traditional e-shop kind of a situation, it is super easy to sign up and go through their 184 items, find the one you want, and the bidding seems to be very, very easy. In fact, we're going to do one live right now. I'm going to bid. You can
tell them which one you're bidding on?
Yeah, well, yes, because I don't think I'm going to win it, but I am going to bid on a set of patches. I'm not going to bid on the Urashikage Jewel because I know Diana Davis is trying to get that, and I'm not going to put her on.
But there's 3 of them. There are 3 of those.
There are 3 of those. So I am placing my bid for a set of patches. We'll see if I win it. So you've got the button, the Outlook, Google, and SMS. That's to sign up to be notified, to remind you so you pay attention,
right? The auction process, because not everybody's going to be familiar with Propstore.com. Yeah, so the auction you can bid right
It's
now
asking me to confirm the
through
bid.
July 7th.
I'm gonna say yes.
Okay. And you can basically put an advance bid like Joe is right this second. In fact, he just
Boom.
did it.
Bid.
But you can also wait until July 7th. And a lot of people will do this, similar to eBay. They'll wait to the
Yeah.
very last minute and say, I want to beat everybody out and don't want anybody to have an advantage. What's a little different with us is that where eBay will do sniping, where you can come in at truly the last second and place your bid and
The
outbid
worst.
somebody.
The worst.
We have what we call a extended bidding format. So if you bid anytime within the last 5 minutes, it extends it another 5 minutes. So if it's at 2 minutes and you add 5 minutes, it's seven. That just tries to level the playing field a little bit. And
Chuck, as an eBay seller myself, I
Yeah.
applaud you so much for that. I absolutely loathe the sniper bots. They're the worst. I
Yes.
love that it extends the auction and really gives people, fans who aren't just there to, snipe, the opportunity to say, oh yeah, no, I really do want to spend $5 more and get it. That is such a cool feature. I wish eBay did it that way.
Yeah. But we end it. So as you said, there's 184 lots. We start with lot one at, I believe, 9 o'clock in the morning Pacific time on the 7th. And then we start ending it we schedule it to end every minute after that. But if somebody extends bids, you could end up in a situation where lot one ends after, lot 7 or something like that, because
Yeah.
extended bidding going on.
And I'm now going to sign up for my SMS alert.
Okay. To
So
remind
let's
you.
so
to
let's
check
see
that.
how easy this is.
If you do get outbid, Joe, I will tell you, you will get an alert that tells you that somebody has outbid you.
That's
so it'll give you a
okay.
chance to know that. The other thing I'll say is anybody that registers for the auction, we are actually giving away some free goodies as well. We have some patches and like a pretty complete patch and pin set. I think it's the most complete one that we were able to put together that we're just giving away if you just register. You don't necessarily, no purchases required, but just go ahead and register for the auction and you'll be entered to win that.
And in the time it took you to say that, I just registered for your SMS and to tell it to remind me when the auction for this lot that I bid on. So that's literally how easy it is, guys.
Excellent.
Do not sleep on this stuff. And the other piece of ephemera in your collection that is really, really actually pretty cool, the Cobra box. And I know it's just a wooden crate.
You're talking about the wooden crate
Yes,
from
it's got
third movie.
It's got a great Cobra logo on it.
Yeah,
That would
this is
be-
where they would hide the guns.
Yes,
in the movie. Yes.
that
No
would
guns included, but yes, they were.
that would
inside.
be perfect in your living room to hide some of your collection. And then when someone comes over, you happen to lift it, and oh, there's a Cobra logo on the inside. That crate looks really great.
It is very cool. It is what they also call screen matched. And what screen match is, for those who don't collect movie props, is there's a nice, I guess, feeling when you know that the item that you have there was actually used in the final cut of the movie. And so what we look for are specific flaws or tells on an item. So sometimes with clothing, we saw this a lot with the Duke costumes. The way that because it has that G.I. Joe logo in the fabric and the way that it was cut, it lands differently on every single cut. And so we're able to actually match that pattern to the movies and find out where this particular costume may have been used. Same thing with the crate. There's knots, there's wood grain in there that you can match to, so that you know that this was one of the wood crates that was specifically used in the final cut, and you can sort of see it on screen. So we have a screen match gallery that if you go to propstore.com/GI Joe, you'll see that screen match gallery. That'll show you the items that we have sort of shown you the screen match, and we'll actually show you side by side to a still from the film. But I will also say not every item, we didn't try to screen match every item. So you may find things in there that ultimately you do the same thing with. But we think it's a nice value add to know that you got.
It's a huge value add. Yeah, I learned that from the
Stuff That Dreams Are Made Of.
Stuff That Dreams Are Made Of podcast. Yeah, Dave Mandel show. Which is a great podcast if you're into movie collectibles. That is, and screen matching is, they talk about this a lot. So I did notice that one had screen match, and you're saying there are some other ones that were used on screens. You guys just haven't gone through to
yeah,
verify.
and for people that don't collect movie props regularly, they do make multiples of almost everything. So they don't want to ever be left on a set where they didn't have it. So even with what you'll find with Lady J's lipstick, we have two of those, and that's because they have one that was either in the purse, before she takes it out, or just a backup. And so we screen matched one of them, so we know that that was the one that was used up in the close-ups, and it's, I guess it's possible the other one could have been used inside the purse
Hmm.
before she took it out. But yeah, we try to do some of the work, but we can't do that necessarily for every single item. So that
Sure,
could be some of
sure.
the fun that you have.
And also tangentially here, another item that's really cool, listeners. I'm a massive Bruce Willis fan, and his stunt double outfit from Retaliation is in the lot. So
Yeah, we try to have one of each of the key sort
yeah,
of retaliation
him as
costumes. So
Joe
you'll find a
Colton, and
roadblock, you'll find a
yeah.
Lady J, you'll find a Flint,
So not
and you'll
saying it
find a
was
General
worn by
Colt.
the mask by Bruce himself, but his stunt double. So if you ever wanted to emulate Bruce in his Retaliation outfit, there you go.
Yeah, and I think that they made a statue of that particular costume. So if you have that statue, it's a great companion piece. And it's the jacket and the shirt, so it may not cost you a fortune. It would look great in the shadow box up on the wall.
Hmm.
But those are the things that you can think about how you want to decorate with this stuff. And I say, some people want to, I would say it's not sacrilegious to wear everything. Some of this stuff you can wear, the patches, the pins, or the pins especially. I was wearing those on my GI Joe jacket. As you said, that Cobra pin is
Cobra
really
pits, amazing. Yeah.
like it's a gold. For those that don't know, it's what the Cobra, sort of the Secret Service type people
Yeah.
wear. I think when they're protecting the president, you'll see those on their lapels. But they were, I assume they were custom made. I actually have strangely enough, I have the form of the person that made it sitting next to me. But I believe they were custom made for the production that you can't get. I'm sure people have made replicas out there, but
Hmm.
keep in mind, these were made for the production, not necessarily like the patches, probably weren't put on there. Although some of the patches that we have Velcro on the back. So they may have been at one
Mm.
point stuck to the uniforms and then they took them off when we put them back into wardrobe. Um, but I think that Cobra pen is really cool. There's the GI Joe hat pins, so it's similar to the one that Roadblock wears in Retaliation at the end when you sort of see him firing Colton's gun. You'll see him wearing a hat pin, and we've got some of those in here as well. But those are made out of metal as well. Those are enamel pins that I assume were custom made for the film. Although I
Yeah.
can't confirm that, it's possible they bought them somewhere else. But I would think at the timing they probably all this stuff was sort of customly made for the production, I would imagine.
So if we haven't convinced you yet, there is something here for everyone, not only from a taste perspective, but also from a financial perspective. So don't think you're going to be out of the bidding if you're a man of means or if you're a man of leans. It does not matter if you're a Joe fan. There's going to be something in here that you're interested. If anything, you get in the mix and you have some excitement that day to see, am I going to get it? Am I going to get it? And then find the home address of the person who did and take it. So
Yeah, and I will say, if you went crazy too, if you go crazy like I have a tendency of doing sometimes, if you spend over $2,000, we have an interest-free payment plan of up to 3 months that you can use. So just ask for
that's
it.
great.
So yeah,
and it is important. I do want to point out, listeners, the way Propstore works is there is a 26% fee on top of it. So if you're bidding $100, buyer's premium fee. Yeah. So if you're bidding $100, you're actually bidding $126. But that is totally standard in the industry, and well worth it. Consider it your tax to get something awesome. So, but we want to be upfront about that. And
yes, and it should show you when you place a bid what the price is with the buyer's
it
premium.
absolutely did. Absolutely. As I was going through it, absolutely, it was very transparent on that. So, all you need is a credit card and to know how to type your email address and make up a password, and you too could bid on GI Joe movie props. Chuck, this has been great.
Well,
a real pleasure having you on,
for me,
man.
it's been a pleasure. It's been a long time since we put this together. I think, I participated in that first auction. I hate to say this was probably going to be the last official auction where you have this much GI Joe content into one auction from all the movies, because I don't believe there's a hidden stash of this stuff necessarily out there anymore. But we were lucky because it's been a number of years since Retaliation and in the newer, I guess, Snake Eyes GI Joe Origins came out. But we were able to sort of pick out things specifically that we thought fans would want and try to have a nice variety of different characters and different items in there. And so to have all three represented in one auction was truly sort of a fun thing for me to do. I got to watch the movies. I personally have loved the movies for years. I would say people joke with me as, not everybody's, I started with the comic books and I love the comic books. Obviously there's differences in the movie universe as there are in other universes out there as well. But, I've learned, especially, I really learned to love Retaliation as probably my favorite of the
It's the
three.
best.
Not
Yeah.
to say I have to
Yeah.
play favorites on that.
Yep.
But really, sort of, they each have their own things that I like about them. But the costumes, like I said, that Snake Eyes costume from Retaliation, some of the characters that are in Retaliation for me, Colton and some of those other characters, I really got attached to them more so than maybe some of the others, and sort of going back into the Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow origins as well, and seeing the first iterations of the Hard Master and Blind Master and all those.
It's too bad. It's too bad the director John Chu didn't go on to do anything major or anything.
Yeah, I'm not sure what he's doing these days. I hope he's found some work.
Awesome.
But yeah, it was great to sort of see John Chu. I guess it was earlier in his career, sort of doing very well with. But
this is a real pleasure. So listeners, go to propstore.com, get it. You know what's happening. Sign up, bid on something, at least follow it, and tell more people, share it, get the word. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to be talking to your G.I. Joe friend in a couple of months and be like, yeah, did you see that Snake Eyes auction? And then he looks at you in the eye and be like, I would have given an eye tooth to get that Cobra box. And you're like, well, I knew it.
Cool.
Yeah, you're like, I knew about it. I didn't tell you about it. So tell your friends. Don't get into a fight with your G.I. Joe friends in 2 months because you didn't tell them about this. First thing I did, I told Paul Galliano about that Cobra box. And Paul, if you're listening, I'm sure you are, you're going to get one of those Cobra pins when I win that auction. I'm telling you that right now. Giving it to you because you're a friend. Chuck, thank you so much for being on Joe today.
Joe, thank you for having me, and thanks to all the Joe fans for checking out the auction and supporting us. And I hope it's as much fun for you to look through that as it was for me to put it together.
I can't wait to see the results. And listeners, now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.